Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello once again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Monday's show. On the satellites today, again, lots of clouds coming from south to north here, and especially back to the northwest. Just some variable mid and high level clouds moving into the interior, but there were some flurries up in over the northeast part of the state there, but lee side of the Alaska Range, not much, some clearing. And again, just some high stuff with some showers with this band here, mostly western Cook Inlet, mixture of rain, snow, or in some cases even freezing rain overnight last night. And then more moisture coming up toward the North Gulf Coast, but very light precipitation there. The next big area of rainfall down to the south, break coming in across the Panhandle today, but the clouds increasing. And then a pretty good storm here moving up from south to north toward the eastern Aleutians, and a pretty strong cold front or frontal boundary right through here. That brought some strong southeast winds to the Alaska Peninsula, 40 to, in some cases, gusting over 60 miles per hour today. There were reports of some isolated minor damage around the Cold Bay area, and those winds, in fact, the wind warning is about to expire there, with possible gusts of 75 miles per hour. Then they'll gradually diminish, and that'll all shift up toward Kodiak. The front here bringing some rain, light rain to the Pribilofs, with gusts anywhere from 40 to 50 miles per hour there, coming back and around. And then the northwest winds as high as 40 miles an hour in gusts there for Adak and Atka, and lighter out to the west. And rolling this forward, we'll see that the system here is pulling back to the northwest a little bit there, most of the moisture anyway, with the main low center just south of Nikolsky and Unalaska. And then the next system coming northward is actually still off the chart there, but it has a pretty large cloud shield and area of moisture with it, especially over in this area. And that's going to be coming north tonight in the continued south and southeast flow, with the main low out here over the Aleutians and the higher pressure in over the western Canada zones there. That's going to continue those south to north and northwesterly winds, or northwesterly direction there for the next couple of days, and continue to carry surges of moisture northward to the coastal areas, but really not having that much of effect over the interior, except you will see an increase in the winds as the gradient tightens up. Pretty tight gradient here again with the pressure field with this low 974 millibars there, especially in advance of the front. And that's what brought the strong winds into the Cold Bay area and other locations of the Alaska Peninsula. And that's all going to shift northward here, and that next storm will be pulling up. So gale force winds will become storm force winds tomorrow, or is more likely tomorrow, possibly late tonight for the western Gulf Coast into the Barren Islands, possibly Kamishak Bay, and also for the southeast coast here, gale force winds as high as 45 knots along the north coast developing later tonight, tomorrow. But today, just some variable cloudiness, areas of flurries up along the northeast part of the state there, Yukon Valley up toward the eastern Brooks Range. Arctic coast, a little windier today, east-northeasterlies 20 to 30, gusts 35 miles an hour at times here. Point Lay had gusts up to close to 37 miles an hour out of the east-northeast. Areas of fog, light snow to go along with that, but some breaks here over the southwest in advance of this front, and then that moisture lifting northward. A few breaks you can see along the lee side of the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, and quite a bit of clearing here over this Panhandle, with the remnants of that front that pushed in last evening, actually kind of working back to the north here as that system pulls northward and increases the southeasterly flow. And we'll see for tonight, there we go, this low pretty much pulls back or comes up. It drifts back to the west there. Here south of the Pribilofs, so some pretty gusty east winds, gale force easterlies there tonight until the front lifts north of the area, then they'll drop back a little bit, but staying windy with occasional rain here across Bristol Bay, and that all links up as this next storm lifts northward. Again, the gale force winds on the increase late tonight. Probably not so much on the along the North Gulf Coast. Just some variable clouds here, beginning to notice an increase in the winds after midnight and toward morning. And definitely along the south coast, things deteriorating there with the winds increasing, but pretty nice up to the north, or at least dry with variable clouds or mostly clear conditions. No change over the interior, and those gusty east winds holding, but beginning to diminish along the Arctic coast. You still have those areas of flurries, which tomorrow should lift a little farther to the north, and it'll probably go offshore here. And looks like a pretty good condition there with lighter winds for the eastern Arctic coast, and still kind of hanging on to some marginal VFR conditions or even local IFR at times, or brief periods of IFR, mostly along the central coast. And that easterly offshore flow should help keep the western coast there pretty good. VFR here over the northern areas. And here comes the rain and snow mixed along with the increased gradient here. So it's going to get a little windy or breezy over portions of the interior, Tanana Valley, and areas back out toward the Seward Peninsula with the strong winds. As this low swings northward across Kodiak Island, the winds will tend to become variable and lighter as that crosses, and then pretty strong southwest winds behind this front. In fact, gale force winds from the Alaska Peninsula right up into the, well, right behind the front here with the storm force winds, gusts to 65 miles an hour in advance of the front, mostly from the western Gulf Coast across the Barren Islands and right up into Kamishak Bay. In fact, looking at gale force winds into southern Cook Inlet south of the Forelands. Gales tomorrow all along the coast here, gusts 50 to 60, in some cases 65 miles per hour in the windier areas. Also some gale warnings out for Clarence Strait down over the southern southeast coast, but dry up here to the north, and then the heaviest rainfall will be Kodiak Island back along the North Gulf Coast and over toward Yakutat, with less rain for a change here for the Alaska Peninsula, although there'll still be some showers around, becoming showery there for the Pribilofs, and a lot of showers and gusty winds here over all of the Aleutians. For the outlook on Wednesday, that front lifts northward and weakens considerably. Very weak low circulation there over the eastern Brooks Range, with most of the moisture now long and south, just the upslope areas. That's what it will be the heaviest, but those amounts won't be very significant at all. Form of rain or snow, depending on your elevation there. And still that good southeast wind reestablishes itself here across the peninsula, or maintains itself right up across the southwest interior to the Seward Peninsula. Look for an increase in the winds also here, Kotzebue Sound and areas off to the west. Good northeasterlies way out here, turning northwest over the Aleutians, and still pretty showery but less windy across the Aleutians, and a lot more hit and miss on the precipitation. This week low south flow kind of slips up during the day on Wednesday, and that's going to keep it on the wet side there, especially western Prince William Sound, right down the Kenai Peninsula coastline into southern Cook Inlet or the Barren Islands, with just kind of some scattered showers coming inland with that western Cook Inlet. Just clouds up to the north in the Sitton Valley, generally dry, and also this front heads eastward, but again, still have that ridging aloft over western Canada. High pressure building in behind, so it looks pretty good there. Elephant Cove, even Juneau and Skagway back toward Yakutat. Could see a mostly sunny day right up into the eastern interior with lighter winds. And but again, the windiest conditions now back in the west, and more rain here over the southern southeast coast. Definitely the Metlakatla area may move as far north to catch both Petersburg and Wrangell, but Sitka may escape the rain with just some clouds. Otherwise, temperatures down that way today in the mid-30s to lower 40s. Kind of the coolest area, one of them, Skagway up there at 37, but that's a 34 at Petersburg. So 48 here at Cordova with 43 in Whittier, 8 degrees at Gulkana, 23 at Delta Junction. Still some pretty breezy conditions, but not as windy as they were yesterday. And 18 at Eagle, kind of breezy, but the wind's down from what they saw yesterday, more 15 to 25 miles per hour in that range, a little higher there at Delta. 14 in Fairbanks, 17 Tanana, 1 degree above zero at Fort Yukon, and going up to the north a little farther to the Arctic coast, there we go, lower to mid-20s along the coastline there. 20 degrees, one of the cooler areas at Point Lay, and Deadhorse 21, otherwise up to 28 at Ambler, 24 in Kotzebue, and 23 at Shishmaref, up to 32 on the southern side of the peninsula at Nome. McGrath 22 degrees, 33 at Bethel. St. Michael 30 degrees, and down at Hooper Bay 38, or actually that's Tooksuk Bay. St. Lawrence Island, looks like Gamble had 37 there. And coming down to the Pribilofs, lower 40s with a 43 at St. George, 44 in King Salmon, 47 up at Iliamna, and Port Haydn, which isn't on the chart here, but they had 50 degrees today for the state's warm spot, and 44 at Unalaska, near 40 for the remainder of the Aleutians. Moving on to the lows for tonight, upper 20s here, looks like in the vicinity of Yakutat, otherwise 30s to lower 40s there for the Panhandle, with the 30s a lot more common than the lower 40s will be. Otherwise, dropping down to 5 to 15 below here over areas of the eastern interior, near zero to above here into the west central zones as well as the north slope, mostly in the teens for the Arctic coast, and 20s here along the west coast, warming up as you head down to the south with that still warm southerly flow, keeping those temperatures for the lows quite mild in the lower 40s, Kodiak and Bristol Bay as well as the peninsula. And then on the highs tomorrow, still pretty mild in that area. Let me get a little closer to the box there. There we go. Upper 30s to lower 50s there for the Panhandle, 40s southern Alaska, mid 40s Bristol Bay, and then quite a contrast here once you cross the mountains into the teens, single numbers for the upper Yukon Valley again. And again, pretty cool there, Tok Northway into possibly Gulkana, and teens for the north coast, and 40s here for the southwest coast and the Bering Sea. And taking a look at the flying weather up next, IFR again, areas of here along the North Gulf Coast with that system pulling northward. Pretty good swath of marginal VFR extending in across the southern interior right out to Kuskokwim Bay and on into the Bering Sea. Areas of marginal VFR again pretty isolated there and hit and miss. Again, looks better tomorrow along the eastern Arctic coast. That band of flurries lifting northward, and pretty good VFR here through the west central interior. It's really until you get down into the northern Bering Sea. There'll be a band IFR out there. Otherwise, pretty good conditions behind the front there with that kind of southwesterly flow, and hit and miss conditions with some IFR back to the far western Aleutians. Also IFR in the western Alaska Range here on the east side of the mountains, right down to the Aleutian Range. And the IFR should be improving there. Kodiak Island kind of holding on to some marginal conditions though. And for the passes, Anatuvik, VFR, same forecast for Adigan, VFR on both approaches. No change from what you've seen for the last several days. And let's roll on to the okay, there we go. Adigan. Oh, it's okay. There we go. Lake Clark and Merrill. Same pattern that we saw yesterday for today. Again, tomorrow with the IFR in the eastern entrances and VFR to the west. And same thing for Rainy with the IFR likely here on the eastern entrance, possibly on the eastern entrance. Could be that low, but definitely the lower conditions, ceilings, visibilities will be on the east side here. VFR off to the west. And for Windy, possible marginal VFR on the southern entrance with VFR conditions through the pass and on into the valley. And heading east, Isabel VFR, no problems there. Mentasta VFR, there will be ceilings, especially on the southern side, but they won't be anywhere near the marginal VFR levels of 3,000 feet. And for the moving to Tanita, could see some possible marginal VFR on the eastern approach, but Portage will be IFR, and Chilkoot and White VFR even into the late afternoon. I think most of that moisture, whatever gets up to the north, it won't arrive there until tomorrow evening. And looking at the freezing levels, 6,000 to 8,000 feet here across the Gulf of Alaska into the Panhandle, and still kind of mild here. Again, the overall pattern not changing all that much with just the orientation of the troughs and ridges, still south or southeasterly flow aloft and at the surface there, keeping the warm air aloft up over the interior, but the cooler conditions over the Bering Sea, but there was be some warmer air slipping westward as the cooler air drives eastward to the south. Icing with the system that comes up, look for a band of rime icing. Some of that could be of the occasional widespread moderate variety here. Prince William Sound right into the Kenai Peninsula, Western Alaska Range on down to the Aleutian Range, and that holding off the coast there. And looking at the winds aloft, strong jet here across the Pacific, kind of branches out, but one jet holds together southeast right into south central Alaska, up and over the ridge there, that's maintaining itself here over western Canada and on up into the interior. 9,000 foot winds, easterlies 55 to 65 knots, pretty strong here along the North Gulf Coast. That's right over where those storm warnings are out at. Westerlies, southwesterly 35 to 45 knots there, and that's what's holding those gales in this area. Lighter winds up to the north, and that area wind lifting off the Arctic coast tomorrow, but may return the next day. And coming down to 3,000 feet, westerlies 30 to 45 knots near and south of the Aleutians, lighter right through here than those easterlies, 30 to 50 knots into the Bering Sea. And again, 50 to 60 knot easterlies here right along the North Gulf Coast and into the northern Gulf of Alaska across the Kenai Peninsula and across the mountains there. So turbulence. It's occasional severe, especially below 5,000 feet, or mostly below 5,000 feet, North Gulf Coast. Mountainous terrain in south central Alaska, of course, the Alaska Range as well, and possibly here along the north coast of the Panhandle. Moderate chop for the Aleutians into the south, and areas of nothing too serious up here to the north and west. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest this evening has been on the program before. He's a recently retired naval aviator and also recently chief of staff at the Naval Research Lab. He's been involved with Department of Defense acquisitions, and he was here as part of the 7th Annual Alaska UAS Intergroup Conference. He's been involved with unmanned aircraft systems for a number of years, and it's been my pleasure to know him. JC, welcome back.
Harry, it's so nice to be back and be back here in Alaska and here with the UAS Users Group.
Talk a little about the company you work for, Cherokee Nation.
Yeah, so the Cherokee Nation is a Native American company. It's an 8A company. Our specialties are IT, data management, and it seemed like a logical next step to, since there's so much data being acquired by unmanned systems, to get into the unmanned systems realm, and that's what we're doing. And we've had a lot of luck working with NOAA. We've worked with the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. We manage a test site out in Oklahoma, and we're just doing a great job. Everything from collecting the data to managing it, and then also the cyber, protecting the network, the C2 net that controls the command and control network for these unmanned systems.
So probably most of our audience knows what NOAA is, but would you explain the acronym?
Yeah, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
And what's the mission, and how does UAS factor in?
Yeah, so NOAA, you might know them, the National Weather Service is part of it, the National Marine Fisheries Service, the National Ocean Service. So they have a lot of interest in introducing unmanned systems into the organization. We believe that unmanned systems will revolutionize our observation strategy, much like radar has in the past, much like GPS has in the past. So this is a technology that we're all going to really use, and where we're going to use it is in the Arctic, in marine and marine mammal monitoring, and also with hazardous weather. So the dull missions, the denied missions, the places that are tough to get to, like up here in the Arctic, the dangerous missions flying around here in the Arctic, and we're having great luck with it already.
You know, I think I heard it in what you just said, but would you reiterate what I think is a three-part vision that NOAA has?
Yep. The vision is to take care of those things, marine and marine mammal monitoring, hazardous weather, and do observations in the Arctic. And we're lucky that Alaska has them all. And I call Alaska our aircraft carrier in the Arctic. I love coming up here and doing operations because the second I take off, I'm on station, and we can really get a lot of good done in this place.
So what's in it for the average Alaskan? How are UAS or drones how are they going to make our life better, make aviation better, or jobs? How's it going to affect us?
Yeah, so we're going to gather environmental intelligence, and we're going to use that intelligence to help our people here better protect themselves. We have invading weather coming down from the north, and that is going to bring tough high winds, snow. It's going to bring ice packs, and we're going to help to better predict what areas are going to get hit by this weather and by the ice, and set up evacuation strategies and things like that, and make aviation safety flying safer by giving you better forecasts.
Is there a trade-off? Is there any increased risk, for example, mid-air collision potential, or is there any hidden dangers as well?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is managing the airspace and also communications, just like anything else. So when we're up there flying different types of planes in different areas, I think it's important to just broadcast where you're working through NOTAMs, keep the communications up. We've been doing a great job with the FAA putting together an Arctic communication plan. So if we do have unmanned systems out there flying with manned systems, we're in different airspace and we're going to avoid collision.
You know, we've got just a little bit of time left, but can you talk about, I think you just mentioned it, and I think Fairweather was involved in, there's a daily briefing or a deconfliction process that's already in place?
That's right. The Fairweather guys up in the North Slope, aviation experts, and doing a great job coordinating our efforts. There's a number of oil and gas companies. There's a lot of government agencies flying up there. And we're doing surveys for marine mammals to do science out in the marginal ice zone, and also hazardous weather work. And we've been having morning calls. Everybody checks in, even from our research vessels, and we let everybody know who's flying, where, and what times, so that we have proper airspace separation. Well,
that's really reassuring. JC, we're going to run out of time. I'm always afraid of this, but talk a little bit about you guys work with everything from Global Hawks, which are 737 size, down to micros, don't you?
That's right. And just quick on the Global Hawk, this week we're flying over hurricanes in the Atlantic. The NASA NOAA team share 5 Global Hawks. 2 are operational, and we're currently deployed out of Virginia flying over hurricanes and help us with our hurricane prediction. But up here we've been flying Scan Eagles, we've been flying the AeroVironment Puma. We just finished a month-long deployment out in the icebreaker Healy, and we were studying the marginal ice zone, and we did oil spill drills up there too. So we're really pressing the technology, and we're flying where other things aren't fit to fly, and bringing back the data from that.
Well, thanks for what you do, and I appreciate you being on the program again.
Thanks, Eric.
I look forward next time you're in Anchorage and get you back on the program.
You bet.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Until next week, fly safe.
Welcome back. Well, winds on the increase later tonight, especially over the southern areas, but tomorrow gales, almost storm force winds. We're going 45 knots in the forecast out of the east here with 17 to 18 foot seas, southeast 40 down along the south coast. Gales for Clarence Strait there, southern inside waters. Small craft advisories everywhere else, all the way up into Lynn Canal. And then for Wednesday, those winds come down, actually probably come down overnight Tuesday night, but down to 15 knots northwesterlies turning north. And then with that system down to the south, could be small craft northeasterlies there along the south coast. Otherwise, the inside channel's pretty light here over this portion, southeast about 15 to the south, and lighter for Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. And then moving on to the North Gulf Coast, again, the storm's coming in early tomorrow here for the western areas into the Barren Islands, and 40 knots there right into Kamishak Bay, and then behind the front some southwesterly gales following in behind, gusts as high as 50 miles an hour. Small craft advisories though for the Shelikof Strait area, and then these gales into southern Cook Inlet. Prince William Sound, gale warnings out tomorrow for northeast winds, and 25 knot winds for northern Cook Inlet. And for Wednesday for this area, Winds come down considerably. Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet down to 10 knots, even here for the North Gulf Coast on the eastern area, 10 knots, 15, 20. Holding on to small craft advisories there, both for Kamishak Bay and the eastern zones of the zones on the east side of Kodiak Island, and out to the Alaska Peninsula. Southwest 25. This is actually a low-end forecast. I think there'll be more 35 knot range, so it should be gales out here. Lighter winds, but probably about 20 knots or so, lighter for Bristol Bay. And then for Wednesday, those winds pick back up again, 40 knots here, southwest of Kodiak, southeasterlies 30 to 35 knots, Bristol Bay. Hold on to the small craft advisories though for the peninsula, 7 to 13 foot seas. Out in the Aleutians, for the east side there, southwesterlies 25 to 35 knots there across the Fox Islands. Westerly gales mostly south of the Aleutians with 20 knots on the north side. Small craft advisories on those western zones. And then for Wednesday, southwest to south, 20 to 25 knots for the Fox Islands, and 20 to 30 knot winds here for the central and western areas. Up in the Bering Sea, northeast 25 knots to 35 knots over the northern areas there, St. Matthew Island, east 30 for the Pribilofs. Wednesday outlook, winds still possibly gale force here for Wednesday there over the Bering Sea in that, the gales are gone. Well, 30 knots for St. Lawrence Island. Small craft advisories down the coast, lighter for the Pribilofs. The Arctic coast areas, northeast 35 or east northeasterlies 25 to 35 knots there with the higher winds in the usually windier areas, 25 knots for the Chukchi Sea, and that was for Wednesday. And tomorrow got it reversed there, 25 to 30 knots on the east side, 20 to 25 on the west side, and then those winds will be higher on Wednesday.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.